Hello and welcome to this edition of Northwest Newsweek. The Thunder Bay District Health Unit reported 2 new cases of COVID-19 Friday. A woman in her 50s from the Thunder Bay area and a man in his 80s from a First Nation community are both listed as hospitalized. In both cases, their exposure to the virus is still yet to be determined. Meanwhile, the 2 health units in this region are no longer advising people who travel outside of northwestern Ontario to self-isolate for 14 days. And while travel does increase the risk of COVID-19 being brought back to this region, Thunder Bay's medical officer of health says that risk is getting lower. Ryan Benazzo reports.
The number of new COVID-19 cases continues to dip across the country, and the Thunder Bay District Health Unit is now offering a more optimistic view of domestic travel.
As we get lower, it's actually more reasonable or more feasible that we could travel with less risk of bringing the virus back.
The health unit is no longer advising those who travel within Canada to self-isolate for 14 days. Instead, they should simply monitor for symptoms and isolate only if they begin to feel ill. This as new cases in Ontario dipped below 200 on Friday.
That was really exciting to see. We could see that Toronto and the GTA is getting their spread under control, very much so. So we see that. We see that in Quebec as well.
Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu has grown increasingly optimistic as well.
We're much better at understanding what this illness looks like. We're not afraid now, especially in Ontario, to test people, even asymptomatic people. So there's a very good testing strategy coming together for Ontario. And we have a much more comprehensive approach to contact tracing.
But that doesn't mean we're out of the woods, and people still need to take precautions.
The virus is still here, and what we all need to be doing is maintaining those measures that we could do as individuals or as families to, maintain that distance between our, 2 meters, stay home if you're sick and get tested.
And if the numbers do rise, DeMille notes we have the capacity to handle that.
We're not overwhelmed right now, nor is the health system here.
Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Last week, the Ford government announced that tourist camps could reopen to Canadian clients. Corey Nordstrom spoke with a few camp owners in the Rainy River District who don't see the point in reopening when almost all of their business comes from Americans.
Vince Allen owns Amick Lodge on Rainy Lake and has one word to describe a summer without American tourists.
Devastating. There's no doubt that 100% of my business is U.S. based. I have absolutely zero based out of Canada.
Both Allen and Bill Gooden own seasonal tourist camps in the Rainy River District. Gooden has a campground and cabins that house a few essential workers, but without Americans, that's only 5% of his business. Gooden has put just one of his many boats in the water for renters. Allen hasn't put any in, saying there's no point in it this year. Kenora MPP Greg Rickford understands the difficult situation, but says it may be time to look at other parts of Canada for tourists.
But the challenge and the opportunity will be to attract a different customer here. I've already fielded calls from some of my friends across the province and in fact across Western Canada who've said, hey Greg, we've never done this before. We'd like to come out and do a camp stay.
It's possible, but I don't think you're going to get a lot more. A lot of my guests that have canceled for June have rebooked for later on in the year. So we hope to have, if the border opens up, we hope to have a busy fall.
The folks in the Muskokas or just north of the GTA, it's fine and dandy for them. That's their draw. But everyone from Sioux Narrows, Nestor Falls, through Rainy Lake, and all the way through northern Ontario is based upon U.S. tourism.
It's expected that the international border will reopen by June 21st, with non-Canadians needing to quarantine for 2 weeks after coming over.
My business here is based on a 7-day week. Saturday to Saturday business. The folks come in on a Saturday afternoon from 3 till dark. They leave before 9 in the morning. They stay for 7 days a week. A 14-day quarantine, no one's going to buy into that. No one.
Allen says some of his friends in the lodging business may not be able to brave the financial implications of losing out on a summer's worth of business. But Rickford, being chair of the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund, says they will come up with innovative offerings for small businesses, including these camps. Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
The Northwestern Health Unit is dealing with some new COVID cases. On Monday, they confirmed that 2 of the cases reported last weekend are inmates at the Kenora jail. Neither of them displayed symptoms of the virus, but were tested along with other inmates and staff at the urging of regional health officials. Earlier this year, the Ontario Human Rights Commission included the Kenora jail in a damning report outlining the crisis in the province's correctional centers due to overcrowding and inhumane conditions at the facility. But despite the fact that the Kenora jail is still near capacity, Medical Officer of Health Dr. Ian Gemmell says he's satisfied that jail officials and the ministry are doing everything possible to control the spread of the virus inside of the Kenora facility.
There are 2 ranges in which the 2 people who have got positive tests are staying. So those are basically now become kind of quarantine or isolation ranges, and so there's special precautions there. As I understand it as well, they are basically closed down so that they won't be having any visitors who are extraneous to the situation there.
Meanwhile, a possible risk of exposure to COVID-19 had the Northwestern Health Unit asking Kenora residents on Wednesday to recount some of their latest grocery store visits. People who shop at the Walmart or the No Frills grocery store in Kenora between 2 and 4 in the afternoon on June 4th may have been exposed to the virus. Medical Officer of Health Dr. Ian Gemmell is advising people in either stores in that period of time to self-monitor until June 18th and to self-isolate and get tested for COVID-19 if they develop symptoms. He says the risk is low due to social distancing and infection control practices, but he wanted to be transparent with the public and let them make their own decision on if they wanted to get tested.
We want people to know what we think, but also to say that if you are worried, that testing is available to you. So we're not making a recommendation to be tested. We're only advising people of the situation and of the very low risk, because they may hear about the situation through other means. And we want people to know what the risk is all about.
Gemmell says the 2 people contracted the virus outside of the Northwestern Health Unit's catchment area. Community screening for COVID-19 continued along the North Shore this past week. The Nipigon Family Health Team set up an assessment center at the town's community center on Tuesday. Testing began in Dorian last week and moved to Lake Helen First Nation on Thursday. Cole Promain has more.
Since the start of the pandemic, members of the Nipigon community have had the option of getting tested voluntarily at the Nipigon Family Health Team Clinic. But in an effort to encourage more people to come out and get tested for COVID in a more isolated environment, team members swabbed around 50 individuals who could come into Nipigon Community Center either by appointment or by simply walking in. The mayor of Nipigon, Richard Harvey, says the town really benefits from having such an available service.
Good. We've been very fortunate that we have had testing for those who've needed it in the past, who were at risk, so we've had very good access through our hospital here in town for anyone who is at risk or who there are concerns about. But we're also very pleased because there's a lot of people who may not be perceived as being high risk who could have been exposed, so we really appreciate that.
Nipigon residents would come into the isolated area in limited numbers where they would have their temperature taken and were asked a series of questions. Alicia Haskell, an RPN who's been doing the swab, says it's very nice to do this in her hometown, but would like to see more young people come out.
I like providing this type of opportunity for those that would like to just be swabbed just for some assurance. We would, however, like to see a younger group of people attending. Not sure how to get them to come out for this test, but it would be nice to see some younger folks heading in to have the test done.
The Family Health Team also hosted a clinic at the Lake Helen Reserve on Thursday. Cole Promain, TBT News.
OPP are investigating the theft of a large sum of money in a remote First Nation. Sometime between June 7th and 8th, someone forced their way into a business on the KI First Nation. The break and enter resulted in the business losing between 80 and 100,000 Canadian dollars from its safe. Anyone with information about the crime are asked to contact the OPP's KI detachment or Crime Stoppers. Kenora Rainy River MPP Greg Rickford announced a number of funding projects in his region this week. It includes more than $1 million for the agri-food sector from the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund. Rainy River Future Development Corporation is receiving $1 million for a 2-year tile drainage program in the district. Bryleman Agriculture Limited also received almost $100,000 for new storage facilities and for new equipment. Rickford later announced funding for new infrastructures in Fort Frances. Steps have been taken to provide faster care to those in an emergency situation with the planned addition of a heliport at the La Vérendrye Hospital. Riverside Healthcare received $100,000 for the infrastructure upgrade. The project is slated to be complete sometime in the next 2 years. Town of Atikokan has received funding for a number of projects, both to keep residents there and to attract more to the town. Corey Nordstrom explains.
While this plot of land may not seem like much, it will serve a needed purpose for the town of Atikokan, and one that's been a long time coming.
Approximately 10 years, we've wanted to find a place for the seniors to stay in town, rather than having to leave. Like several have gone to Thunder Bay and gone to other places because there was no place here.
Construction on the Aspen Court Senior Living is likely to start this fall. Atikokan Mayor Dennis Brown says Community Living Atikokan were the main proponents of the building and are close to securing $12.5 million from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation for the $14 million project. They have a July 31st deadline to finish a number of components to secure that funding and are going to need community support and to fundraise in order to move along with the project.
It's going to be called the Aspen Court for seniors living. There will be 38 apartments. I believe 31 of them are going to be 2-bedroom apartments and 7 are going to be 1-bedroom apartment. And there will be 11, I think, of the units will be rent guaranteed income.
Events in the town will also receive a significant boost thanks to some FedNor funding. The Atikokan Economic Development Corporation received nearly $172,000 to hire a community economic development officer for a 3-year period, also $185,000 for a mobile event stage, and $82,000 to implement a tourism marketing plan, including new media and signage.
Tourism is important to our community, and anything we can do to have a facility where we can move from place to place, depending on what's happening, I think that's important.
Additionally, the White Otter Castle, an Atikokan hidden gem, is going to get some upgrades. The Friends of White Otter Castle group is getting $185,000 to refurbish the 106-year-old 3-story beacon on White Otter Lake. Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
When we come back, a plan for an alternative route over the Nipigon River has been scrapped. The Ontario Ministry of Transportation is abandoning a plan to create an alternative route for vehicle traffic over the Nipissing River. The province and its consultants spent 2 years studying the options after the new Nipissing Bridge malfunctioned due to cold weather in 2016. Area politicians have mixed reactions to the backup route being cancelled. Jonathan Wilson reports.
In January of 2016, the new Nipissing River Bridge snapped and heaved at one end, splitting Canada in half for 17 hours. That prompted a study into a secondary route for highway traffic. Consultants were hired and public meetings were held, such as this one in 2018, to explore the options. In late 2019, the province quietly decided to put a stop to the plans. In an email to TBT News, the MTO says their risk assessment determined another bridge closure was highly unlikely. The study found that an alternative route across the river no longer needs to be considered, and the ministry is working with local communities to wind down the study.
I'm both surprised and disappointed. I'm surprised because a considerable amount of work was done to work on an alternative route based on the possibility of another emergency occurring on the Nipissing River Bridge. And I'm disappointed because I still think it's the right move. I still think that an alternative route should be put in place. So I'm, as I said, not happy about that at all.
Yeah, I think you're going to find you'll find some people who are going to be very upset about that, believe that this is a very important issue. You'll have others who will feel that it's not.
Nipissing Mayor Richard Harvey wasn't surprised the project was cancelled, and in fact says he never thought it would ever move ahead.
And a lot of us were wondering how successful that would be. It's very rugged terrain in this area, very difficult terrain. It's either rugged or it's wet. It seems to be what we've got going north from here.
The new Nipissing Bridge was fully open to 4 lanes of traffic in the fall of 2018. Harvey points out the malfunction occurred when the bridge still had just 2 lanes, and he agrees with the MTO that a full shutdown is very unlikely.
It's one bridge, but it was built in 2 halves so that it has that ability to, if they have to close down half of the bridge, the other half can still stay open. From a financial perspective, it wasn't worth doing it for the low likelihood of the issue happening again.
Gravel says he still wants the consultants' options to be narrowed down and acted on.
Did you think there was one that might have been inexpensive?
Well, I think there was one that was, to me, it was never a question of expense. It was a question of what is the best route that would do the job if indeed another emergency occurred. So I think the options that they brought forward some good ones, and I still think they should be looked at. I am, as I say, I am surprised that the Ministry of Transportation has made this decision, and we'll be contacting the minister to see if they can get her to look at it again.
Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
There's an update and a clarification to share regarding the 2020 Terrace Bay Drag Festival. In late May, we reported that the test and tune set for June had been canceled, which still stands, but a second test and tune set for July is still tentatively scheduled, along with the drag festival itself, which takes place on the August long weekend. Terrace Bay Mayor Jody Davis says he's spoken with festival officials and calls the situation fluid, adding things can change with restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Really, it depends on what's going to be allowed at the time by the province and the federal government and the municipality. We want people out here to have a fun, safe time. We want the dragsters down here doing their craft and having a good time, but we want to make sure that everybody's safe.
Significant milestone for a local politician came this past Monday. It was 1995 when MPP Michael Gravel won his first provincial election in the former Port Arthur riding. 25 years later, and Gravel is still going strong, holding the PC government to account, much like he did the first 8 years of his career at Queen's Park. Troy Charles caught up with Gravel to get his thoughts on his long career serving the region.
It's been quite a quarter of a century for Michael Gravel, who planned to mark Monday's anniversary quietly, in part because of gathering restrictions put in place due to COVID-19. Gravel says it's always fun looking back over his political career, which began in April 1995 when he won the Liberal nomination in Port Arthur and then went on to win his provincial riding in June of that year.
It's incredible to look back and think of those days and remember how exciting it was to win, how daunting it was to win, a little bit scary, and not being entirely sure what was before me, but I threw myself into it with all my heart and soul, and here we are 25 years later, and I'm still standing. So,
Gravel said he's proud of what he's been able to accomplish during his time in office, including 15 years in government, 11 with a cabinet seat under former premiers Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne.
As minister, probably my proudest accomplishment is the 4-laning of the highway between Thunder Bay and Nipissing, followed closely by the purchase of the Terrace Bay pulp mill by Deidre Burla and the fact that continues. So as a backbencher, my proudest moment might be persuading our government to fund insulin pumps for people living with diabetes. That was a huge issue back in the early 2000s.
Gravel has been victorious in 7 consecutive provincial elections, which is a tremendous feat for any politician. He claims he doesn't have a secret to his success, but he credits his relationship building within the community.
Other than the fact that I think they know how much I care about the riding and how much I care about the communities that I represent, and I try very, very hard to make sure that I get the best possible results for those constituents.
Gravel said he's not done yet, saying he still feels connected to his constituents and wants to seek another term, which could be a tough task with the Liberal Party under new leadership and with no official party status. Lastly, Gravel just wanted to show his gratitude for the region he served for so many years.
Certainly a great big thank you for supporting me so strongly over the last 25 years. I mean, there have been ups, there have been downs. There's been elections I won by larger margins than others, but my constituents have continued to support me in a very strong way, and I'm very grateful for that.
Troy Charles, TBT News.
When we come back, a devastating church fire in Pass Lake, but some important archives survived. The Salem Lutheran Church burned down in Pass Lake on Tuesday, and many residents had feared the community's complete historical archives were lost as well, as the documents were stored in the church's basement. But fortunately, it appears they survived the fire. Cole Promain has the story.
The Salem Church in Pass Lake stood for 90 years before an overnight fire completely destroyed the community landmark. On Tuesday evening, after the fire was completely out, the Pass Lake Fire Department used an excavator to recover the cabinets which contained Pass Lake's historical archives. And despite being a little warm and damp, everything seemed to be intact. Since then, the Pass Lake Historical Society has begun working diligently to try and maintain the condition of all the records which date back to 1928. Dozens of community members came together to hang photos and place paper towel in between pages to try and preserve their quality. Restoration organizer Mary Morup says the community turnout is great to see.
I'm very happy with the efforts of everyone coming out today, and the Historical Society has been going on for a very long time, so it's nice to help them out as well. And being born and raised here doesn't hurt, so it's just nice to help to give back.
it's awesome that the people have come out to help us, and yeah, everything is sort of beyond words right now because
it's just sinking in, really.
Yeah.
While the loss of the historic Lutheran Church is a major loss to the community, Pass Lake Fire Chief Brendan Grant was well aware of how much more could be lost.
Yeah, I mean, right from the very beginning of, even at 4:30 when we arrived on scene, I had known for years that the church basement was used as the resting site for the archives of the Historical Society. So from the very arrival to scene, that was my priority, was to try and preserve those documents.
Morup says she hopes more members of the community will come out to volunteer to help with the restoration, but expects it to take several weeks. Cole Permain, TBT News.
Town of Rainy River has decided to open its park. Town Council had been mulling over the decision for a while with worries about opening Hannam Park, which includes multiple boat launches on an international waterway. The reopening became official on Monday, with many towns opening up a portion of their parks weeks ago. Residents of the town of 1,000 will now be able to use the municipal docks to swim and fish, the horseshoe pit, and the campground. Mayor Deb Ewald says Rainy River is still going to keep its beach closed, and like most other places, are holding off on opening its playground equipment, wading pool, and public washrooms.
Like, you have to do such intensive cleaning with the bathrooms and the, on the play structures and stuff. It's just not feasible right now. So we'll just wait, and as soon as playgrounds are opened up elsewhere, we'll be opening that part of this too.
The town also runs a kiosk serving chip truck style foods. It will reopen once they hire summer students with social distancing and other policies in place. That's all for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.